Coming to you from the dining room table at East Barbary Lane, welcome to a special edition of Full Circle, the podcast. I'm your host, Martha Madrigal.
And I'm Charles Tyson Jr.
Today, we are going to celebrate a trans voice, which you will find us doing often. I am delighted to introduce a published author. She has over 20, or has 20 pieces out there right now, and there's more to come. And Charles has been reading your work. Please welcome Allison Church to the Full Circle table. Hey, Allison.
Hi.
Hey, glad to be here.
Oh, it's so good to see you. It's so good to see you. We have had a couple of conversations before getting together, and I'm so glad we're getting together.
Looking forward to it.
So I want to talk about, so you are also a trans baby of the pandemic, just like I am.
Yes.
While my transition started in 2018, my HRT started, that leap into this is real. And let's see what estrogen does. Was the summer,
Ooh.
right? Was the summer of 2020. So talk to me as much as you're willing to about your transition, about coming to it, and maybe why the pandemic was the moment.
Well, I've known since I was 15 that I was different. And I gravitated very early on in my years toward the female side of the street, but ego/father, battled it all my life. A man doesn't cry and all that stuff and all that BS. I didn't really get into entertaining the reality that I needed to change until the pandemic, because the pandemic kind of focused me on the fact that you're only on this showboat once, so you might as well try to enjoy yourself and find out who your true self is.
Oh, amen.
And yes, I had one of those lost weekends where, everybody upends the bottle and all that. And I looked in the mirror. I can't tell you exactly what it was, but it was an epiphany that there was a voice at the back of my head that said, enough. It's time to be who you are. And after that lost weekend where I got very pickled, I walked out on a sober Monday morning and said, hello, world. My name is Allison.
I love it.
I do too. So that was 2020.
Yes.
Okay.
November 3rd.
So you are in law enforcement in the Midwest. Yes. You work primarily as an officer in a hospital setting.
Yes, I do.
What was that like?
Well,
introducing them to Allison, and how's work?
Well, I must like the work because I've been doing it for 15 years.
Okay.
I went in and I talked to my supervisor, who was a woman, and she knew that something was up. I mean, when you work with investigators, they know from body language that something is up. And they could tell that I was abnormally quiet. I'm not a quiet person. But I went into her office and I told her that I have been seeing a therapist for the last 8 months. And I was diagnosed with gender dysphoria. And I do plan to transition from a male to a female. And then I put my head down because I was waiting for the proverbial, rejection and all that. And she just said one word. She said, okay.
That's
and
the
I looked
proper
up
response.
And I said,
right.
Yeah, and I looked up and I said, nothing else? No, I cast thee out or anything like that.
Right.
Outlander. But no, they handled it like a champ. There were a few officers who did have a culture shock.
Okay.
And I tiptoed into that culture shock because in the future, when I was learning transitioning how to put on makeup and dressing like Allison, had my own culture shocks. And like you said, HRT came along and estrogen, and all that, or I should say estradiol. And femininity should come with warning signs because my emotional template went.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, I went from a cool, calm, collected Mr. Spock to Khan Noonien Singh. Star Trek nerd tips.
I
Fair.
love it.
I had to constantly go into the bathroom because I would see things at the hospital that would be so sad, and I
Mm.
didn't have the ability then to control I mean, Niagara Falls almost
Mhm.
every day, at least once or twice
You're
a
like a
day.
raw nerve.
So I had to go. Yes, yes, and I had to go into the bathroom and cry it out and dry up my tears, fix my makeup, and go outside and pretend to be the stoic deputy,
Mm.
and it was like I was living a Walter Mitty, Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of existence. And it was, you have to keep the face on because once anybody senses, weakness or something like that,
Yep.
it's like a pack of dogs. They like to nip at you. And I make it a point to look insults right in the eye and never flinch.
Right.
Good. Yeah, you have to.
Well,
Oh God, yes.
I've said to folks, um, I believe we're the generation um, where being trans, is certainly obviously more in the media, more in front of people. This is the generation.
Yes.
There aren't actually more of us in reality, but there are far more of us known and more of us
Yeah.
being comfortable being known. So I feel like,
I look at it like this. We're kind of like trans trailblazers. We're blazing the trail for future generations. Like the only thing I can compare it to is like the civil rights movement and the people who forge ahead in places like Selma and all that. We are taking we're taking the brunt of what they will be able to live with freedom. We're knocking on the doors.
well, yeah. So, I know some of the trailblazers from the 70s who really had a different experience than
Yes.
today. Um,
It was like the Dark Ages.
but
Mm.
yeah, but where I'm going with that is I think we still, if we're willing to put it on our shoulders, it is our responsibility where we have the capacity to have conversations that so other people
Oh,
don't
absolutely.
along the lines to answer certain questions. Now, there are certain questions I won't answer because, I want to point out that you would not ask a cisgender person about their genitals. So we're not going to talk about
No.
mine. Like there are certain things, there's still that. But that conversation aside, I'm willing to have some conversations that so that other people don't have to. And I just
Yes,
sense you are
yes.
too. 'Cause-
Oh God, yes. I mean, if I can help someone to keep from crying at least once, God, that's a victory.
yeah.
If I can help somebody once not be terrified to go outside in the simple capacity of wearing a dress, that's a victory.
I hear that.
I mean, because I understand. I was there. I had that day. I was terrified. I mean, the first day I showed up at work dressed up as me, I had to wear larger pants because I didn't want people to see that my knees were shaking.
Mm.
I was so terrified
I hear you.
because some of them didn't know, and I kept it down to the group of people that I worked with at first because I didn't want them to be all like, traumatized to the point of just standing there like catatonic.
Right.
But when I walked in and they all saw me, I honestly could not tell you what they said or what they were doing because I was looking down at the ground and I was just trying to keep my stuff together.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Been there. Been there.
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah. Been there.
that's a watershed moment for any trans.
Sure. Sure it is. Because I think we come into ourselves. It takes a little bit. It takes what it takes, actually. And we are in a different era. The game used to be you leave everything you've ever known and everyone you ever known, and then you start to transition socially and you create a new identity, and once you've completed that in whatever way you do, medically or otherwise, um, you never go backward and you don't talk about it. And
It's kind of like a sleeping with the enemy kind of thing. You just try to create a new identity. And like I used to say when I first started out and was going through the pressure, I said sometimes I would just like to go to a place where they know me as Allison and never knew him.
Sure, sure. And I hear that. But it wasn't us that was even saying it. I mean, there were doctors. My friend Elizabeth was one of the early transitioners through Johns Hopkins, and they
Oh wow.
refused her. I believe she was 1972, and they had refused her because she wasn't who they were looking for. And what that meant was she wasn't willing to hide. She just wasn't willing to do, as they interviewed her and talked to her, no, she was just, I am who I am. I have this, thing I want to take care of, but that's all. And you're the people who take care of it. So would you please? And, she finally convinced a doctor that I am exactly who you're here for. But again, at that point in time, just the fact that the hospital was doing, had that program was quite controversial.
Right.
And they were afraid if, a whole bunch of trans folks ran out talking about, hey, look what they did for me, it could, severely impact even the program. So we've come a long way. We've come a very long way.
Yes, we have.
And
I remember there was I asked at one of my meetings, what was the quintessential spearhead that actually brought sex change or transgenderism into the American conscious? And one of my friends, who is an entertainment historian, said that back in the year I was born, I won't mention that because I don't like telling my age, there was a television series called Medical Center. Very popular, very, very way before Emergency.
right.
And there was a character there that was played by the actor who played the father on the Brady Bunch. And he was coming to see the doctor, and he wanted them to do a sex change operation. They didn't have the word transgender back then,
Right.
so that's what they called it.
Right.
And it was a watershed moment for television, because that's the first time on a national television series that something like that came up, with a star at that time who was, well known.
Right.
He himself was terrified because he thought that it would ruin his career, but he still went ahead and did it because he himself lived an alternative lifestyle.
He did.
And,
he did.
So there was that to consider. And I love entertainment news, and I'm a genuine nerd about everything. So if you want to talk about stuff, I can talk about
Right.
stuff.
So
But that was the first time
on
that
television.
I ever heard of that time. Yeah, on television.
Okay.
Yes.
Because, we're close in age. I remember a neighbor boy had just seen on Phil Donahue. It had to have been, I guess, the summer, because we were watching daytime television. And he was really excited to tell me that he knew what I was now because he just saw it on Phil Donahue. And he
I
told
think
me.
I remember that episode too.
And he told me. And of course, this is later than Christine Jorgensen. I mean, and, but this is television now. Because
Yeah, and it's
but that's
it's great
interesting
that
because
happened.
I didn't know about Medical Center. Now I gotta find that. Reed, what was his name? The actor who played Mike Brady. Wow, if only we had little machine. See, this is we Google stuff all the time.
Right.
Mike Brady was.
And what was really marvelous for the technology and makeup they had back then, he looked kicking hot at the end of the episode.
Okay,
course,
Robert
we all
Reed.
know
Robert
I'm
Reed.
not-
It took me a minute.
It's not that easy and quick, but for the luxury of an hour-long television series,
Right.
they got
Okay.
the catwalk thing down pat.
I didn't know about that. But I did know, most of our representation has not been good. Most of it is, either freak show or villain or, we die in the end because that's what's coming to us,
Or combinations thereof.
or combinations thereof. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, we don't have the best. We haven't had the best representation in media.
Well, that's one thing that I'm trying to do in the work that I do in my fictional writing is that I want to create people who are assertive, positive, they want to give to society. Now, there might be some that are a little disturbed, but that's just the content of the story that's being told.
Right.
I mean, would Norman Bates have been as spectacularly evil and frightening if he was Beaver Cleaver, you know?
Right.
Well, true.
I mean, but most of the people that I portray in the stories as transgender are both adventurous, but at the same time cautious because they know the world they live in.
Okay. Yeah. I think that
You
that's
know?
important. So you told me
Yes,
something, and we do want to get to your writing, but you told me something about working in the hospital. Uh, that you've had some conversations with kids. Can you talk more about that?
yes. There are individuals who come to the hospital every now and then who are of a suicide slash homicidal intendant, and they feel down. They don't want. They have no meaning in their life. They want to end it. So naturally, um, we show great concern for theirs. But the cross that I like to bear, if you can call liking bearing something like that, is if I find the suicidal child who is a transgender, and I will go up to the nurse and I will tell them if you want me to talk to them, I will. I even ask the social workers that are there. In fact, they're starting to ask for me now. They're saying, "Is Allison working tonight?"
Mm.
And I'll go in and I'll just, very unobtrusive. I'll go in and they'll see me in my uniform with the belt and the weapons and everything. And on my name tag, I have a little transgender flag in the corner. And I'll go up to them and I'll look at them and tell them, "Hello, my name is Allison. I work here in security. I am a trans woman." And then I put up my hand and shake theirs. And they're usually in awe by this time. And I look at them and say, "Is there anything I can do for you? If you need to talk, that's what I'm here for."
Okay.
And
And
that's what they
it's
need. Yeah.
sometimes that's what they need. And also, at the same time, I try to alleviate the frustrations between them and their parents because I try to make the trans person understand that what their parent is doing sometimes, underline that word a lot, sometimes is not out of cruelty. They themselves are in a sense of social mourning because they are losing the son slash daughter that they knew and loved. And this new person, like a like a changeling, has come up and is, "I'm no longer Dennis, I'm Diana," kind of thing. Or "I'm Diana, I'm no longer Diana, I'm Dennis."
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I try to do both sides of the story because, like the old saying, there's three sides to every story: their side, your side, and the truth. And it's the truth that I tried to give them, that this will not be an easy road. You have to first start with acceptance,
Mhm.
then learn about what you're confronting, and then try to understand it. And with understanding comes forgiveness and sometimes acceptance. Now, there are people who will never accept because, of social dogmas or religion.
Yeah.
You can't really help someone get over a god. So
That's a
I just
tough
try
one.
to help as much as
I've said that before. How do you
possible.
argue with God? Because
There's only one way that I've seen someone argue with God,
yeah.
and I quote the one sentence: "Excuse me, but what does God need with a starship?"
Oh, well,
Fair.
He got it. He got
That's
it.
that is a good question.
now it in
And
your
why is he always broke?
right in your community. Is there a P flag chapter? Is there an organization, or are there resources that you can point parents to?
Yes. I first and foremost don the experience to the social workers
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because where I am trained in practicality to understand who I am. They are trained to understand this little puzzle that's going on right here in their
Sure.
minds. I do not assume the fact that I know all the right answers, and I'll tell them right off the bat. I'm just one voice in a choir. You're going to be listening to a lot of people, but the one thing I can tell you from experience, it won't be easy, but you're going to have that one moment where you either look in the mirror or just have an epiphany where for the first time in your life you're comfortable and you love yourself. And when that happens, I can't even describe what that feeling's like. It's like ode to joy, winning the lottery, and eating chocolate at the same time.
We call that gender euphoria. And when you hit that moment,
Yes.
yeah, it
God, it's wonderful.
decidedly different than it's been.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and then the world changes. It's like you go from like the Wizard of Oz Sepatone to Technicolor.
Yes.
It's true.
It's,
It's true. So I love that.
it's
So
an interesting.
how long have you been
It's an
writing?
interesting. Since I was probably 15,
Wow.
when I
Okay.
first started questioning who I was, and as a kind of vicarious transgender voyager, and I still do this to every single book I write. One of the characters in the book is always me, even in the one you read.
Okay.
It one of the characters is always me. I could be male, I could be female. Sometimes I was female, and I vicariously lived that fantasy, and it was wonderful. It made my writing more three-dimensional to me because I had a chance to explore something that at the time I didn't have the gumption or the courage to do. I mean, I was 15. How do you go up and tell your father, who is an ex-Marine drill sergeant, that you want to be a girl?
Right.
Yeah.
You don't. And that's how I kept my sanity, so to speak, to know, at least in my imagination and my mind's eye, what it was like to, be who I am today. And I will say that reality is a lot better than fiction.
Mm.
It is, right? Once you realize you're actually
Yes.
living and not in your head anymore,
Oh, I'm still in my head, but
Well, yeah,
at
we're
the same time, I live a duality now. I live in both fact and fiction.
fair,
Okay.
fair. So let's talk about that. So you are currently writing a series, and Charles read the first book in that series.
Yes. Dark Passenger.
Okay.
Yes, it's my favorite work.
So, and
On many,
I think we asked you, what is your favorite book? And it's for us to start there. And that was the one you suggested.
Right.
And the only part of this I can even talk about, I am kind of, I love the actual history of the Titanic. I find it fascinating. There's certainly a lot of work that's been done around that story. And
oh God.
did you like the movie? Because I hated the fucking movie. I hated the movie. I just did. I hated
I
the movie.
hated the song.
Okay, well, I hated the song
song.
too because I hated the
Every
movie.
every time that piccolo plays, I want to do an Elvis Presley. I want to shoot the radio.
Your heart does not go on.
my heart stops there.
No. That, and the only other complaint that I have about the movie is that the bitch could have shared the door.
I
Thank
know there
you.
was room on that door.
It's been mathematically
They
proven.
could have alternated.
Yes.
Yeah.
They could have
Yeah.
alternated.
So much could happen. I don't think she wanted to. I think she wanted to leave the memory of him behind, and she did.
I noticed in the book that there was a point where, at one point, one of the characters that was in a lifeboat got off so that the captain could get on, and I was like, "See, they could have done that in the movie, and then they both might have made."
Oh yeah, yeah. Speaking that scene right there, where at the spoiler alert, at the end of the disaster, Captain Smith does survive in a way. One of the people that read the book as a beta reader for me was the great grandniece of Captain Smith.
Wow. Okay.
And she said she loved the book, and she gave me her blessing, and she said that it was an amazing piece of work, that I depicted her famous great uncle the way that most of the people in her family said that he acted and was around other people. And she said she loved the kind of surprise ending at the end because it added a little bit of more of lore to, because there's lore about how Captain Smith died that goes out the kazoo. But
I bet, yeah.
that one was a unique one, and that was a proud moment. That someone whose family and history was, inadvertently invested in this sad part of history, and come out and say, okay, you had the captain die in this particular way instead of the historical way, and I liked it. It was like that was a moment that I liked that moment.
And historically, it was what he just went down with the ship.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
Okay.
so he did. So yeah, there's that. I didn't really lie. I exaggerated.
Right.
But you didn't create a whole other couple and a fucking necklace.
No.
So good.
Right.
Good.
However, for all the Titanic fans out there, Mr. Cameron did do his research. There was a second-class steward whose name listed in the crew listing was just simply J. Dawson. So that name did exist.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Yeah, I did enjoy the juxtaposition of the two stories. It's a monster story and it's a historical a historical fiction story that we all are at least marginally familiar with the Titanic.
Oh yeah.
And I love the way you dealt with certain things. Yeah.
The inspiration of this for the novel itself came from, I was actually going to just do a historical book about the Titanic. And I came across this 1922 newspaper article that was done by the Sun before it went National Enquirer.
Right.
That said that, or they claimed that the Titanic's sinking did not happen because of an iceberg. It happened because of a cursed mummy case that was in the cargo hold going to the New York Museum of Natural History. And that intrigued me. And I went, yeah, and because I've always loved the Hammer film, Amicus film, Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee type monster stories.
Yes.
And I figured, what if we had on board a retired Scotland Yard investigator who had one time been associated with the investigation in the Jack the Ripper killings.
Yeah.
Be called on by the captain or the purser to investigate a series of murders until they reached New York. And I was going, this is good. I could do this. At first, I was just going to have it be like a Jack the Ripper type person. And then I'm thinking, after I read that newspaper article, I said, the Mummy movie with Christopher Lee in it scared the gajeebies out of me when I was a kid. And I think it would do the same thing for people reading the book. But I wanted to make it a female mummy because there's not that many movies where the mummy was a woman.
Right.
True.
And I appreciated, like, when you initially told me the premise of the book that it was a mummy. The mummy has always been one of my least favorite monsters. It's like, okay, fine, whatever.
You rank them?
But this was the first time that it was actually a frightening character for me. I was like, oh, shit.
She was notoriously evil.
Mm-hmm.
Her name meant the light of death.
Yes.
Her name was Kare.
Kare, yes.
So her name meant the light of death. And I really went into the research of how the Egyptians looked at the spirit, the soul, the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
And it added to the story because at the same time, there's a little subtle backdrop in her past where she was wronged. And that's what turned her into being who she was.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I like villains that had their heart broken. And I'm not saying she did, because I do plan on one day revisiting her and the wreck of the Titanic.
Right, because it was the end, question mark?
Yes, I love stories that did that. They don't do that anymore.
They don't.
They barely put the end on them.
Right.
We are going to take a break. I want to get back to this conversation,
Yes.
but I love that we have you on the line right now. We have a little breaking news. Ketanji Brown Jackson has been confirmed as the
Woohoo!
first Black woman on the Supreme Court. If you knew that already, you got more news. But yeah, that's pretty amazing. So please
Yes,
stay
it
with
is.
us. We're going to pay a bill, and we'll be right back. And we are back with Allison Church. So I right before the break, we were talking about the extensive research you did into the history of the Titanic story before writing the book. Um,
Yes.
let's talk more about that. Was that evident, Charles? You think?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There you gave quite a bit of detail through the ship's builder about the details of the construction of the ship, and you definitely created that sense of place. Like I feel like even if I hadn't seen the film, I would have been able to. I was able to really visualize what the grandeur of the ship. You definitely did
Oh
that. Yeah.
yes, it was a beautiful ship. It was a beautiful ship. Um, One of the reasons why I did so much research is because my main character, Dennis Parker's friend, was Thomas Andrews.
Mm,
And in order to have someone like that in a story as horrific as the Titanic, I would have to know a little bit about naval architecture, compartmentalization, floatability, why the Titanic sank, period.
right.
And there were I put some tall tales or legends inside that story too, because there are people who believe that the Titanic wasn't the ship that sank; it was her older sister ship, the Olympic.
Yes.
That that's proven to be a brouhaha, because they clearly saw on the stern propeller of the Titanic uh, the job number that Harlan and Wolff Shipyard put on there to give her identity before they gave her identity.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
But it makes for a good story. At the time, you couldn't prove it, so
Right.
there's that. And there was also the story that one of the reasons why the Titanic sank is that they cut cost on construction.
Right.
That is total legend. It just made for a great plot device in the story. And I feel sympathy for those people that build something and through no fault of their own find out that they've gone from creating, you know, the perfect thing to Frankenstein's monster.
Right.
And that was one of the things that I wanted to use, because for the life of me, even when I was little and I saw the Walter Lord classic A Night to Remember about the Titanic,
Mm,
I couldn't figure out why the ship builder or designer of the ship didn't want to try to save himself, because one, he was a family man, and two, there were answers even to this day that only he would have been able to provide.
Right.
right.
And the only thing that my imagination could up with is that if he went down with the ship with the Gilded Age, post-Victorian mentality they had back then, he would have died like a man and would have been a hero.
Right. Yeah.
If he would have survived and they would have discovered the cost cuts, he would have been associated with murderers, and his family would have been, you know, stained forever with
Exactly.
shame.
Yeah.
And I could see somebody of that mentality in that society claiming or wishing to stay and just go down with the ship.
Okay.
And I romanticized it, yes, but a girl has a right to be romantic.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Do you know?
And
I'm sorry.
sorry, go ahead.
One of the most interesting things that I ever learned, or ways to look at the story, anew, that there was a touring show in Philadelphia. It came to the Franklin Institute, but I think it went around the country. I don't. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes,
Uh,
yes, it was done by RMS Titanic Incorporated.
we
Mm.
took my daughter and her class, and what I loved is they were each given a boarding pass with a
Yes,
name
I
on
was
it.
too.
Okay. And then they walked through the whole ship, or the displays, there was some of the furniture, there were recreations, there were different stories about who was on board, and it was really fascinating. But the thing that stuck with me was at the end was the list of passengers and where they were on the ship and who
Yes.
survived and who didn't. And it became very clear, that there was a class system to who survived and who didn't and where they were on the ship.
Yes.
And so it was
Oh,
really
yes.
profound. And I think the kids left with that same sense of, this is just randomly they were assigned a ticket and then they found out if that person had lived or died. And
Oh wow.
so you
The
had,
person I was assigned did not survive.
okay.
It
But-
was a third class steward.
Right. Okay. That was just such an interesting way to me to humanize the entire story and make it personal, especially to kids.
Yes.
That they really got it.
One of the things that they don't like, or they kind of overlook at it, is that the gates that were closed at that time,
Mhm.
White Star had this company policy that they would follow the immigration laws of the country they were going toward.
Mm.
So they were going toward the United States, so they were following the Ellis Island protocols.
Okay.
That's why third class and second class were so sternly divided.
Mm.
Now, if it would have happened the other way around, where the Titanic was going back to Great Britain, those gates would have been open because they didn't have such
Interesting.
laws for Great Britain. So it could have been a purely democratic disaster
Right.
if it was going the other way.
Isn't that interesting? And
And
that's something you don't
it is.
just know.
No. It's like I had to learn a little bit about the White Star policies because one of the characters in the book was the captain and the chief executive officer. There was one point in the story where I'm sure it probably piqued your interest, where the captain decided, this is just above our heads. This is above our pay grade.
Right.
We're going to turn the ship around and go back home.
Right. And the head honcho was like, the hell.
And I put in so many what ifs that I could to make it fun
Mhm.
for the people who actually knew about the Titanic history. And actually, at the time that I was writing the story, I have a friend of mine who works for a very famous oceanographic institute. And as a wonderful birthday present, she brought home to me, about this big, a chunk of coal that came from the Titanic wreck.
Ooh.
So I had that on my desk the entire time I was writing this book.
Fabulous.
And after I wrote the book, I went to that Titanic exhibit you were talking about, and through begging and great diplomacy, I talked to the person that ran that exhibit, and when everybody left, I got to stay. And one of the exhibits that they had there is a piece of the Titanic hull called the Big Piece.
Mm.
It's about the size of a garage door, and it's a section of the hull. All I wanted to do was just simply touch it.
Mm-hmm.
I've touched the side of the Titanic,
How about that?
and that's cool for me.
That
That's
is
cool for me because, like, I love history. At one point in my life, I wanted to be a history teacher, but when I saw the way the Department of Education was treating teachers,
Mm.
I decided to move on. Sadly, I make more money doing what I'm doing now
Yeah.
than anybody would be doing as a teacher, and even in a private school.
I know. Well,
It's sad the way that we treat our teachers, because they are the wizards and spin doctors of our future.
Right.
They create or help nurture the great minds that will be the inspirations and milestones of the next generation.
absolutely.
Right. And at the same time, we criticize the education system. Well, it's like you're skipping a step.
I mean,
But
we've talked a lot about what's happening right now in Florida with the "Don't Say Gay" law and the
I want to still
ramifications of
slap
that.
that governor really hard.
Yeah, everyone does. But
You and me both, sis.
the
Boom.
perspective from teachers, it really is interesting, and it is chilling. Um,
Yeah.
and
I loved how they turned their own bill against them.
I did too. I did too when they said, "All right, now we're removing all gender." That you saw that. Everybody's a
Yeah.
they and a them, and yeah, we're gonna get rid of all the books that have any relationship at all, because it is making them say, "Well, that's not what we meant." We know what you meant.
Right.
We've known what you meant
We
all
know what
along, but say it
we
out
know
loud.
what you meant. There was somebody when they were writing that bill metaphorically was standing there and going,
Mm-hmm.
Well, and
Mm-hmm.
what's interesting. I just read a couple of pieces about some gay conservatives, which that to me is an oxymoron. But gay conservatives who are just shocked that they were going after the transgender people, but what are they doing coming after us? And it's like, oh, honey, that's still how this works.
Mm-hmm.
That's still how this works. You know,
"Well, it's like that old notion, the poem about the Second World War. When they came after my neighbor, I did nothing. When
yeah.
they came after the communist, I did
Mm-hmm.
nothing, and so on and so on and so on. And at the end, it says, when they came after me, there was nobody there to stop them."
Mm-hmm.
Well, right.
You pulled that right out of my head. I had the same thought. Yep.
Right, because with certainly with the passage of gay marriage and all of this, you thought they were done with you. You
Exactly.
thought you'd made your point, and it really does kind of show the distance that has always been between the L, the G, the B, and the T,
Mm-hmm.
and that
Yes.
it's sad because we all are in the same boat. We really are. And you can't just watch them drill holes in my end of the boat. It doesn't work that way. So I look at all of this as a bit of a wake up call, but I really do. I hate what it's doing to teachers. I hate what this bringing up critical race theory, which of course is a course taught in law school, but using it
Yeah.
as shorthand to try to further whitewash history. And
No matter how brightly you color it,
Mm-hmm.
hate is still hate.
yeah, no
Exactly.
kidding. No kidding. But I could see why.
You can sugarcoat it, but it's hate.
Right. Right. Writing about history is probably a better way to teach it than having to stand there and try to teach it in this environment.
At the very least, if somebody reads my book, they may go, that was interesting. I'm going to read what actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. How close did she get?
Right.
So where is
Well,
the series going? So we started on the Titanic.
Mm-hmm.
well, the second book is, I will have to say before I even talk about it, for mature readers only.
Okay.
That's
All
me.
It's
right.
called Drop Dead Gorgeous.
Okay. All right.
It's called Drop Dead Gorgeous, and it's the story about a wronged wife's revenge against the cheating husband.
Mm.
Oh, interesting.
Unfortunately for him, she is also one of the top uh, geneticists in the world, and she's got a lab in her basement.
Oh shit.
So to teach her cheating husband a lesson, she's going to make sure that her husband can never cheat on another woman again
Mm.
by knocking him out, putting him down in the lab, and inch by bloody inch, transforming him into the most drop-dead gorgeous woman in the world.
Ooh.
Interesting.
So when you look at the cover of the book, you see the character in a basement with a light on him like that.
Right.
And from here up, he's Joe Dirt.
Right.
From here down, he's a Playboy bunny.
Oh, wow.
He's got a female body, and you can see that he's just like one shot away from everything in his world going to, it's a forced transition story, so to speak.
Okay.
Kind of like the only thing
subversive.
the only thing I can compare it to is like the foreign film that they did called The Skin I Live In.
Hmm.
If you remember.
I have heard the
that
title.
ended-
I have.
It had Antonio Banderas in it, and it's a very interesting story. But it was my way of also vicariously living through certain inclinations and feelings and fantasies I was having at the time.
Okay.
Mhm.
And one thing about books, no matter if you're writing them or reading them, they do help with your imagination
Mhm.
and escape, mainly escape. But when you're writing it, you just feel like you're the captain of your own ship and you can have it go where your heart desires. And even though I am not that disturbed, it made for a very disturbing. It was my homage to Robert Bloch and the Norman Bates stories and the just juxtaposition of having Norman be at that time what they called a cross-dresser. I mean, he
Right.
could have just
Yeah.
been a frustrated transgender schizophrenic, but that's the second book. The third book is going to be called Battle Not with Monsters. It's still in the process of being proofread for the third time because I always do 3 proofreads before I hand it to an editor who looks at it and goes, "Did you even read this?"
Right.
Right. Of course.
Because a writer cannot proofread their own stuff. They got too much invested here and here.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
can't make the story work. There are times when someone would want to get rid of a chapter. I really went tooth and nail with the editor on Dark Passengers. I said, no, this has to stay in the book because what happens in chapter 3 makes sense when you get to chapter 9.
Right. Mhm.
But The Battle Not with Monsters is a story of a paranormal investigation group, and one of them is a transgender.
Okay.
So it's it's highly speculative, but I studied the paranormal psychology angle a lot. And I tried to get in a lot of the gizmos and stuff like EMF readers and ion detectors and EVP tech,
And proton
phenomenon and stuff. I
packs and
tried to get
ghost
all,
traps. I'm sorry, wrong.
yeah, almost. I even had the metaphysical slash spiritual angle put in there. I have uh, 2 people that are on the team who are kind of like a cross between Max von Sydow's character in The Exorcist,
Mm.
and kind of a little bit like like the Men in Black in a kind of way. Gave me
Okay.
kind of that mysterious, you know, someone else is thinking, I really need to get this particular instrument, and they put out their hand like that, and just magically that person anticipates it, puts it in their hand. I love well-oiled machines that the teams where they work like that.
Mhm.
And if you know someone, whether it's being married or involved with people, you know what they're thinking, and sometimes you enact on it. I love that magic that people have when they know people.
That does happen with
And
us sometimes.
It does.
see, I love that stuff. I love that stuff. And I love stories about ghost hunters where some of them are natural born skeptics. Because the one thing that a lot of these people fail to realize is that if you desperately go looking for a boo in the night, and I'm not talking the hooker kind, if you're looking for a boo,
That would be a boo thing in the
if you're looking for a
night.
boo in the night, yeah, you're going to see monsters where there's only piles of socks.
Yeah.
You need a Scully
And
till you're
people
Mulder.
yes, or you need a Vincenzo to your Kolchak.
Okay.
Oh, you didn't get that.
No.
Did you get that?
I-
Oh, okay.
no.
Well, Chris Carter was inspired to create the X-Files from an old 75 television series that was a one-season wonder called Kolchak the Night Stalker.
I remember the Night Stalker when it
Oh.
was out because I was raised
Yeah.
by a television, and
Vincenzo was the editor, played wonderfully by Simon Oakland.
Okay.
And of
Got
course
you.
Kolchak. And that's where he got the Skulder Moley dynamic, was from those two.
oh,
Come on, deep
interesting.
reference.
I did not know that. I did not.
Yeah.
It's a
Well, they the one episode that Darren McGavin was in the Twilight and in the X-Files, he was originally supposed to play Carl Kolchak, but Universal Pictures would not give up the right for 20th Century Fox to do that.
oh,
So
okay.
he just had to be a retired guy.
Right.
How about that? I remember the Night Stalker. I don't remember watching it, but I remember it existing.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love that show. I loved that show. I used to watch it on CBS late night, and it was basically a monster of the week kind of thing. And it's like, one week it was a zombie, one week it was a vampire, Jack the
Right.
Ripper. Oh God, it was wonderful. It was magic. Scared the bejeebies out of me when I was a kid.
Nice.
The old putting your pawns up here and wrapping your legs around and just kind of peeking through your arms, watching it. You knew what was going to happen because you've seen it a gazillion times, like a Star Trek episode.
Right.
But still, the wonderful magic and anticipation of a childhood's, fright level was like magic.
That was me with the with Twilight Zone.
Yes, that too. Because of that show, I carry around 2 sets of glasses.
Ah, nice. No Burgess Meredith for you.
No. It's like it's not fair, but screw you. I got another pair.
Exactly.
Right, there you go.
So what?
I love those shows.
So with So you're a fan of horror films, perchance?
Oh God, yes. I love the old Hammer horror films.
Mm.
I love the Amicus films. Those aren't really known as much, but I'm also where I got to learn the Amicus films from is because I'm also a huge Doctor Who fan, and I like the Peter Cushing movie that they did, Doctor Who and the Daleks, and that was done by Amicus Films. And a lot of Doctor Who fans don't like that show because the studio did kind of diss the original actor who was playing the first Doctor at that time.
Right.
But they wanted a name, and his at that time hadn't gone to the fandom and popularity that it ended up becoming.
Okay.
So I can't begrudge him that. I mean, if you're going to put money into something, you want money back.
There's always that.
It's just that. Yeah, that's the like Orson Welles once said. He said that the marketplace has always been the enemy to the artist.
That part.
Yeah.
Oh, and so it goes.
Well, it's the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
If you're going to dance with the devil, you got to realize sooner or later he might take your soul.
Yep. Yeah, the business part of show business is the
Not for the weak.
yeah.
Yeah, it's why I got out of show business. You can love the craft and hate the business. I mean,
Yes.
I was watching an interview recently, and I can't even tell you who was interviewing whom, but a younger person was saying, I loved this show, and I cannot imagine why they would cancel it. It was so well crafted. And, the older persons they were talking to said, I promise you it was a financial decision.
Yep.
I don't know on whose part, but it was probably, oh yes, I do remember. It was why was Noah's Ark canceled from Logo? And I think it was Bruce Valanche being interviewed. I think.
Yes, I remember this conversation.
And he said it was probably too expensive to make, just to continue it. Doesn't matter how good it is if there's no return on investment. Like that's just how this works.
Right.
Otherwise, everything would get
it's
made, and our favorite things would stay on the air forever.
Right.
But then again, every now and then there's a comeback from a failed property, and
Look
it
at
makes
Futurama.
more money than
It
Look
does
at Star
happen,
Trek.
sure. It's happened where things have gone from like network television over to cable, and then had another successful run,
Yes.
or they don't. But
the original
ans-
Star Trek was a flop.
Mm-hmm.
It was a flop. I mean, it barely held the Nielsen's at that time, and if it hadn't been, I think it was one of the first shows in American history where, if it hadn't been for the fans, there wouldn't have been a third season. Though I think that it could have. The third season sucked, but they actually did a fan drive that told NBC, "We love this show. Please keep it on." And I guess there was enough of them where the Suits said, "Yeah, let's give it another run. You never know."
Okay,
And thank goodness.
It became a cash cow, but
A little
like
bit.
right.
20 years later. Yeah.
A little bit.
Never underestimate the powers of the fans.
This is true.
Like, I mean, that helped Eureka for a couple seasons, even though for some reason the Suits at the Sci-Fi channel didn't want to keep it on. See, I'm with them when it's like I'm trying to ignore this factor
Right.
because it wasn't very expensive. It was a very expensive post production project that they were working on.
And that's always the issue. It's like,
Yes.
no matter how good the property is and even how many people are watching it, if it costs too much, it costs too much.
It gets the kibosh.
Yeah, whatever too much to them is. And it feels arbitrary.
That also, I think, and the person that controls the chairman or something like that, if they don't like it, it's doomed anyway.
Yeah.
If they don't get it, they don't get the show.
We have an ongoing issue in our house because horror is just not my genre. And
oh, okay. Well,
I had a really scary childhood. I had my brother and I never had a good relationship, and he thought it was his mission in life to toughen me up, and he did that, physically and emotionally and psychologically, and I feel like I lived a lot of that adrenaline and a lot of that tension and that fear, and it was real. And so for me, I don't know, maybe there's a magic day where I work through that trauma far enough that I can be entertained by it when it's fiction. But I have a hard time with it. And it's not all of it. You know what I mean? It's not, there are some things that, like I went to go see Silence of the Lambs. I loved it. Didn't that psychological, like I got immersed in it. It was surreal. Nothing triggered me. But then there was something you made me watch because you thought it would be okay. And
10 Cloverfield Lane.
Yeah. And the end of that totally freaked me out. Totally freaked me out.
Because I figured like
and then I was mad at him.
I feel like the compelling performances in the first 87% of the film would, override the last like 10-15 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, it's a thing. Like I don't know. I haven't tried to work with that much.
I'm with you there to a certain extent. I do not like horror that is gory.
Okay.
I mean, I don't like watching somebody sitting there and just as an afterthought chewing on the small intestines of their victim.
Yeah.
That I don't like.
Yeah.
I prefer psychological horror for the simple fact that the greatest monster that you can get the movie watcher or the reader to be frightened of is the one that they're anticipating and making up in their own imagination.
Right.
That's why I like Rod Serling and Richard Matheson, whom is my favorite writer, by the way. They were masters at this. They spin doctored and created monsters that were not only believable, but terrifying on a visceral level without, too much blood splatter.
Right. Yeah, some movies like I don't like the Saw movies and like much of Eli Roth, the torture porn. Can't do it.
Yeah, and I watch it and I'm just like, all right, why was that there? And who's going to clean that up?
I kind of like the way they make fun of it in the scary movies where the guy on the floor was actually Dr. Phil and he was trying to saw his off.
Cut his own throat.
That kind of it goes into that. I like that. Like I said, I don't like you called torture porn. The scariest monster is the one that's actually right in front of you, and they're so good at concealing who they are that you don't see them until it's way too late.
Well, that's like the first Saw movie was actually good, but
it was. And
everything after
the guy that played him had a kind of a sympathetic angle to him too. You could understand, if not condone, why he was doing what he was doing. Then they just went Fruit Loops.
Right. They realized they made this house of cards and we have to spread it out through, I forget how many damn movies they made that thing happen through. And it went from implausible to that's just dumb.
Yeah.
And gross.
And it's like, how many times can you split a head open and make it look original?
That part.
Yeah.
I
Now, when it comes to horror that involves transgenderism or stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
the first one that I saw that I consciously remember when I was still trying to figure out who I was in here
Mhm.
was a Brian De Palma movie called Dressed to Kill.
Yes. Yes.
Starred
Yes. Yes. Yes.
starred Michael Caine, and he had that dual personality. They did that so well because when I first saw it, I never assumed that the identity of the woman was who it ended up being. I'm trying to save the surprise for people who haven't seen
Yeah,
it.
Right.
I think it's a problematic representation of the trans community overall. But
Also
Well,
that.
yeah, very stereotypical, very, very dated, but
right,
it's Michael Caine.
Also that.
true.
He's an excellent actor
He is.
whom, from what I understand, has retired, and I wish him happiness and fulfillment in his retirement.
Yes.
But I liked him as Alfred too, and a lot of people didn't.
Oh, I liked him as Alfred. He was good.
Good. He was very good. In the last movie of that trilogy, I liked it because everybody's wish came true, including Alfred's.
Right.
So
Hmm.
that was cool.
Have you seen the
She's
new
over there
Batman?
going, no, I
I haven't
haven't.
either. Yeah.
It's not that I don't want to because I love comics. I love both DC and Marvel, and both my snakes get along with each other when it comes to that. I like DC because
See,
it's totally flamboyant and fanciful, and I love Marvel for its reality.
Right.
You know, you
I
got
love that.
superheroes that are bitching. They're superheroes that bitch because they really don't want to go out and save the world today. They want to watch the Super Bowl or something like that,
Right.
like normal people when we go out and do stuff.
Right.
But I love Superman. I love Wonder Woman. I would really like to be Wonder Woman.
Right.
right. I hear you.
When I was 5, I did too.
There you
Oh,
go.
Linda Carter.
I used to-
met her.
Me
She is a
too.
wonderful
Yeah.
person.
I used to put on my
She is
cowboy
a
boots,
wonderful-
and I used to take a big bath towel and clothespin it around me like a cape, and I would spin around every time she did. God, I was a little gay
I
child.
had this little like lasso that I would wear, and I had this belt. For some reason, I had to wear a belt. That when I spun around and did that, instead of the explosion like they had, the belt would fly off and disappear.
Yeah.
Ah.
It's like the things you do when you're a kid to try to make up for the fact that you don't have the multi-gazillion dollars for special effects.
Exactly.
But I met Linda Carter and I told her that, and she laughed and she clapped. She hugged me. She kissed me on the cheek. I didn't wash that cheek for a week. And she said, "That's a very darling way to do the transformation. Thank you for sharing." And I mean, I was euphoric for the rest of the day. Someone could have stuck me with a pin, and I would have gone, "Thank you."
Right.
I wonder, have you, and maybe you haven't thought much about this, but you probably have. Transitioning, which
Mhm.
as we talked about, that means introducing hormones. It really does mean changing yourself emotionally in ways I don't think any of us can see coming until it's there. How has it changed your writing? How has authenticity changed your writing? Has it gotten better? Has it gotten different? Is it harder, or do you just cry more?
I actually do all of the above because there are times when I'm writing my stories, and like I said, one character is usually me, and I invest in that character. And if something bad happens to that character or to a character that character loves,
Mm-hmm.
I know it's good because while I'm writing it, I kind of have that romancing the stone moment where, Catherine Turner, she's writing the story and she's crying and she's got the headphones on, which I also wear when I'm writing. And I go, "This is good. This is good. Hopefully no rewrites, but this is good." And there are times when I will get so involved in what I'm doing that I'll go back and proofread what I have done. And there will be pages that I consciously do not remember writing. And I'll go,
Uh-huh.
"I wrote this?
Yeah.
It's
Right.
good."
Right.
That happens to me. I'll just get into, I guess, a zone in writing, and I will be sure it's crap. Like that I just wrote a stream of consciousness that makes no sense.
Yeah.
And
been
then I'll
there.
reread it and I'll say, My God, this is so
I wrote this.
cohesive. Like this is almost like I didn't write it, but then I'm like, yeah, I did. You know,
Do you do you lose all sense of time too when you're writing?
yes, yes,
There will be times when I'm writing, I'll look up at the clock. I got a clock right above me, and I'll look at the clock, and it'll be like 8 o'clock in the evening, and I'll go back and I'll type and I'll type and I'll type, and what seems to me a perception of maybe 20 minutes has passed. I'll look back up at the clock, and it'll be 2 in the morning.
yeah, hmm,
I'm not exhausted. I mean, it's, I've done all this work continuously, but I'm not tired. It's like I got this personal creative high, and like I said, I lose all sense of time when I do that, and it's amazing. If I could find that superpower, channel it, and use it at work, oh my God.
Right. Right.
Well, and I think that,
And,
that's when you know that you're doing the work of your soul. That's when you know that you're doing the
yes,
thing that you love.
yes.
And, I think,
And when you were talking, I'm sorry,
go
Kenny,
ahead,
I'm sorry.
go
I
ahead.
got to. When you were talking about the things that change when you take hormones and stuff, when I was the other person, I was more like the news reporter, the Ken Barbie guy. I would just like talk to people, wouldn't talk. The using of my hands and the body language that I do now, this is all Allison. This is stuff that I didn't do before. It's stuff that I probably wanted to do, but I was running around with the preconceived ideal of what a male was supposed to be and
Mm.
crap like that. And it's just like the genie's bottle opened, and all the characteristics that are now mine as Allison that I thoroughly enjoy,
Hmm.
they're here to stay. People just going to have to live with it.
There you go.
We are going to take one more break, and pay one more bill, and we will be right back with Allison Church. I am enjoying this so much. Please stick with us. And we're back. So, Allison, before we point anyone to where they can find your work, some of it you've made the conscious decision to keep the writing that's out there in your dead name out there. And
Yes,
would you talk about that?
yes. I had to face that quagmire when I went through my initial phase or genesis to become Allison. And my birth name is Donald Allen Kirch, and he is the one who did most of the work, and he spent the nights typing at the typewriter, um, rewriting, going through the frustration of writer's block.
Mm.
So he deserves the honor that he deserves. And when I became Allison, I changed my name to Allison Church. The Allison has nothing to do with my birth name's middle name. One of my favorite fictional characters through my entire life has been Alice in Alice in Wonderland, the Lewis Carroll books.
Mine too.
And
Mine too.
I always liked her attitude that I try to do 6 impossible things before breakfast.
Right.
And that's how I got my first name. My second name is just the simple English translation of Kirch. Kirch is the German word for church. So I'm doing that little bit of homage, but it's been doctoring it in a way where it actually feels and fits who I am now, who I've always been. And I tell people when they go to look for my work to look it up under the original birth name.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look up, there is one particular novel that I've done as Allison Church called The Keeper at the Gates.
Yes.
And if you go to Amazon and look up Keeper of the Gates and hit the little blue author's page, Amazon, through their immense understanding, have merged both of my author's page into one Allison Church page.
Yes, they have. Yes.
And
Okay.
I was so happy that they did that. I mean, I went around grinning like a banshee for a day, telling people, strangers that I met in this grocery store, my name is on my author's page on Amazon, and there you go away.
Right. Get
But
back, strange
I
woman.
was, yes, and it was fun. And I tell people that right now I have a website. It's under donaldallenkirch.com. There's no space between the names. It's all one glob. And once I legally change everything, I'm going to try to think of a creative way to take both sides of my universe and make it one um, website identity name, some .com name that suits the situation at hand.
Okay.
And Donald's books will always. I look at them though. If you want to look at them in a certain way, look at them as my Bachman books.
Ah,
You know,
Stephen
when
King
Stephen
reference.
King, yeah, when he became Richard Bachman because he was writing experimental stuff that he feared that if it was a flop would ruin the gravy train that he was starting at the time, and I totally understand.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Well,
So those are my books.
okay,
Okay.
yeah, because Martha Madrigal is a pen name. It's not my government name, um,
Uh,
but it was a decision, because I guess I haven't figured out, what to do with that entire identity, um, that did a lot of
totally,
things,
totally understand.
yeah. So I did a lot. I was involved in a lot. I've lived a pretty public life, in a small town way, for
Yeah.
decades. And it was, so I haven't figured out the name thing. And it kind of just felt that was in the way. But Martha Madrigal was something, Charles called me out of love. It was a nickname. Um, because he said you're kind of a blend of Martha Stewart and Anna Madrigal, the character in Tales of the City.
I like it.
Um,
I like
and I
it.
said, for now, well, and at least professionally. So let's have a nom de plume, because that was given to me in love, and you know my name wasn't even necessarily given to me in love, because my birth name was bestowed by the brother who hated me for most of my life. Maybe I was an okay infant, but the minute my wrist bent the wrong way, we did not have a good relationship. And
Yeah,
i didn't
that was
know
me and my.
I didn't know
Mhm.
until I was an adult, and my sister and I were sitting on my front porch, and she said, "Yeah, he never did like you, because he said I have no use for that child." And I was little. Um, I wanted a baby brother. What I got was another sister. And I'm like, so y'all knew, even then, y'all knew. Um,
I when I didn't even have a title or a category to put my unique life experience in, I always knew that I was different. I knew, but I couldn't put a label on it,
sure,
you know.
sure.
And ironically, at the time that the transgender flag and the movement came out, I was living in Phoenix, Arizona when it was just burgeoning, and
Mhm.
I saw, not that I anticipated this, but I saw in the news this flag,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I'm going, what is that? And then someone, for the first time, I heard the word transgender, and I said, what's transgender? And then somebody said it, and then all of a sudden, ding!
Mhm. Light bulb.
Yes. And I was happy to say that I was in the city where that flag was actually born.
I
So,
love that.
Oh,
I love that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
Okay.
yeah,
I
I'm
love
a happening chick.
it. Yes, you
Yes, you
are.
are. And where can folks find your work? I know that you do Through the Looking Glass. Tell us about that.
Yes, that is basically on Facebook. They can look me up on Facebook under Allison Church. And it is available to the public. You don't have to specifically join my page. Not that I would have room because I have over almost 5,000 people there.
Okay.
But people are people are invited to. It's just my basic day to day, some positive, some negative, some philosophical stuff and happiness. And I try to do it in a way where I don't sound like I'm complaining. And I always say the same thing at the end of every one of my episodes, that I want them to be tolerant to be attentive to them and others around them, but above all, be happy.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Life's too damn short to be melodramatic about it. I mean, yeah, everybody can stand up on a soapbox and talk about their passions. That's a given.
Right.
But I'm not going to be bitter about things that happened to me, 30 years ago, because if you do that, the monsters win.
Mm.
Yeah.
And I just want to basically let the baby trans out there know that what they're doing is an amazing adventure, whether you're transitioning from male to female or female to male. It's an amazing adventure. You get to learn more about not only yourself, but the human animal, because you've walked both sides of the street. You know the story. You know the complete story. There's no more subtext or mystery. You know. And to do that puts more value in what we call mankind. Or we should call humankind now.
Yeah, I like
we're evolving
humankind.
past-
Right.
Yeah, we should call it humankind. But it makes life sweeter knowing that even at my age, I'm 55, I can look around the corner and there's still magic, surprise, and mystery.
Lovely.
There is.
And
There is.
yes. And if you choose to live that life, by all means, be happy as you're doing it, because it will make a miracle into a biblical epiphany beyond what even a writer can describe.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Absolutely. Yeah. The only thing we do choose is transition. We choose authenticity. That's the only choice involved in this. And yeah, it's a thing that's it's hard to describe. With all the words and
Yeah.
all of all the authors and all the.
There's a certain magic to it that only the initiated can actually truly explain, but there are people out there who can try to describe it to the uninitiated and help them understand, at least.
Yeah, we do our best. We do our best.
And and this happens to me at my work a lot. There will be a child between the ages of 5 and 3 when they don't have filters,
I love that.
and they will come up to me and they'll ask me that one quintessential question: are you a boy or are you a girl?
Mm-hmm.
And I know they're too young to understand the complexity of what we're going through and all that. And what I usually do as a generalization is that I'll get down on a knee and I'll look them dead in the eye and I'll answer their question: are you a boy or a girl? I'll look at them and smile and say, yes.
Yeah, that's always been my answer.
Yep. I mean, because at
Yes,
their
I
age,
am.
they're not into that. They probably delved in it a little, but they don't fully understand what they're delving into.
Right.
They have a notion. I do believe that great people, special people like transgenders, all of us when we're formed in the womb are female. Then there's that switch that switches it over to male or female. However, with some of us, no matter which gender you're transitioning into, that particular soul or mind switch stayed in the original position that they are now transitioning into. They're just playing catch up with the biological, playing catch up with the metaphysical.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of 60s hippiness there, but hey.
Well,
Well,
like that.
man.
we're all playing a role, no matter what.
Yes.
We're all playing a role, and it's to say that this is what's performative. It's like, oh no, honey, it was actually all those years that you all insisted I was something that never made sense to me, but I, it was rooted in me that I'd best play along, and I believed it. I was a compliant child for a long time.
I was spared the drama of coming out to my parents. Both of my parents have gone, and people often ask me, how would your parents have reacted to find out that their only son was now just another daughter?
Mm.
And I really hate using that, just another daughter, but
Right.
that's how they would have seen it.
Right.
Right.
Um, my father would have killed me.
Mm.
My father would have flat out killed me. That's probably why it took me so long to actually come out, because I had a big monster in my life. And in fact, in almost all of my stories where there is a monster, the monster's my father.
Gotcha.
Even elements of Kare was part of my father.
Oh wow.
Um,
Okay.
My mother would not have liked it. She would have found it very distasteful. But I also think I get my diplomacy chain from her, because she would have had the good sense to keep it to herself, because she didn't want to add to my misery and the fire to my father's rage. Now, my father was a good man, but he himself had a lot of monsters too, because he was a veteran of the Korean War and he was a POW. So he had his own monsters, and I learned later, with more experience in life and more depth in what adults know, that I ended up forgiving him because of the fact that he came from a harsh time when men were men and women, you know, made babies.
Right.
Right.
And to live that life and then also go through the horrors of war and then have to go through the horrors of torture and stuff like that. He had monsters that were probably bigger than mine.
Mm.
I do bow down to that because I don't know if I could have survived.
Right.
But I do have two sisters, and they're still alive. Both of them live in Phoenix still.
Okay.
And the youngest one totally disowns me. She won't have anything to do me with on a religious base, that she says.
I have one
My
of those.
oldest sister,
I'm sorry.
yeah, the oldest sister, she does accept me, and she's trying her best to learn as she's going along. And there'll be times when she'll say something that's totally inappropriate, but I could see by her body language and her eyes that she did not mean it with malice or consent. And I just, after 3 or 4 hours of letting it stew around, I'll go back and say,
Right.
and she'll apologize profusely, and I'll tell her, don't worry about it. It's a learning curve for all of us.
Because sometimes you don't know what you don't know.
Well, and I think part of maintaining our sanity is in at least always being mindful of
Yes.
where something is coming from. Like you really do need an internal strength, and you don't need to address every misgendering.
Yeah.
A clerk is never going to ruin my day. Just not going to happen.
No.
You can't really.
Hell, they did that to me. They did that to me on the phone before I even transitioned, because I would be on the phone and they'd call me ma'am. I didn't mind.
Right.
Right. But usually and if it hadn't a fit, that would have been really upsetting, because the worst thing
Yeah.
you can do is call a man a woman.
Mm.
But
Well, I tell you, there's been times when I was in my uniform and I was shopping after work, and I'd run into somebody and they'd call me ma'am, or not call me ma'am, but they called me sir.
Mhm.
And in my mind, I'm living out a, angel on one side, devil on the other.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I got to bite my tongue because I just want to turn around. And if you pardon the vulgarity, I'd look at them and I'd point to my hair and say, what part of this
Right.
don't you understand?
Yeah, exactly.
I am not a sir. But
yeah.
I don't
None of
do
this
that
is giving
because it's
sir.
public.
Well, right.
Yes. And I don't say that because I realize I'm in a public place.
Right.
I am a figure of authority.
Right.
And if I did something like that, they'd go, and they gave this person a weapon.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's just
So I got to
it.
keep
I'm not going to fight every battle. If you intentionally do that, that says something about you, not me.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of this it's clear what I'm not. Even if you're not clear, it's clear what I'm not giving you right now. But you don't. If you need to make some political statement or you need to make some religious statement, that's all about you, not me.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
and that is the difference. So the sister with religion, again, it's being placing you in that. Well, I can't argue with God.
Wow.
There are religious folks who grapple, and who come to understand a lot of this is bullshit. A lot of this isn't even in the Bible. It's not in the Bible the
Some
way
of
you
them,
read it. Some.
some of them even priests that say that's bullshit.
Well,
But
And I
right.
I said this once to someone. I said, Christ never said anything bad or good. He never said anything about transgenders or homosexuals or people like that.
Nope.
And then they'll try to come up, well, Peter said. And I go,
Nope.
Peter
Nope.
said,
Nope. Nope.
right.
not Christ.
Right.
Peter, that's true. And yeah, he did say a lot about divorce though, and they've ignored all that. So whatever. But it is we have to kind of choose our battles all of the time, I think, and we do it for our own sanity. So the sister who wants to care,
Yes.
that's just right. It's like, okay, that my best friend still just does it. She just like, I get misgendered, and it's like, and she goes, you know what I mean. Yeah. I'm like, of course I do. Of course I do.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's there. I had a sweet moment with the sister that accepted me once, because we're sitting on the couch and she kind of lays her head on my shoulder and she says, Allison, I love the fact that I am no longer the oldest sister.
ah.
And I thought that was so sweet of her to say that. And I said, well, thank you for pointing out the fact that I'm old.
Right.
Yeah. There
You
you
know,
go.
when someone like a young person asks me, how old are you? I'll usually do a sarcastic thing like, well, I know what 8-track tapes are. We're,
Yeah, me too.
Me too.
The better cars
and
came
I
with them
love
in the
the
dashboard.
yes.
They
Yes,
did.
and there was always one song that you particularly didn't like, but if you memorized it to a certain point, you could pop the track and go right to the beginning of the song that you did.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I had no life.
I understand. I understand. We grew up in the same era. So, Allison Through the
Oh,
Looking Glass, your writing is available through Amazon.com, right? Is that right?
yes,
And if
it
they,
is. There are some selective paperbacks that are available on Barnes and Noble, but no disrespect to Barnes and Noble, I'm not a fan.
okay, that's fair.
I love the Starbucks that are inside their bookstores, but
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
All right.
yeah, primarily they can be got on Amazon. Also, you can go to my website, which is donaldallenkirch.com.
Mm.
And if you go there, you'll be confronted right off the bat with marvelously made book trailers that I had that will give a notion of what each book is about.
Fabulous.
Then you go to the tabs, and on the respective tabs, you'll see the book cover, descriptive. Then the same book trailer again, and then some reviews. And at the very bottom, before you get to the order buttons, which are important,
Yes.
Yes.
you'll see an audiobook sample that will give a book reading of that book, and you can tell by just listening to the sample if this is something that you like.
Okay.
I love that.
So,
And do
no
you
pressure.
do you
No
read your
pressure.
audiobooks?
No.
Okay.
There's only one short story that I read called I Am, and it's available on Audible, and it's the only one I've ever done. I've done it in my original voice, so
Okay.
it's a little huskier.
Okay.
Basically, it's a story about this life form trying to figure out who it is and why it's there.
Mm.
And I don't want to give away the ending because it is the motif of the story. Some people get a holy shit reaction from it, and some people, well, I had a friend that read it, and after she read it and the big reveal came out, didn't really want anything to do with me from that moment on. So there's that warning danger that
Right.
can happen to you are not responsible to a certain extent about the reaction people have to your creative work.
Mm-mm.
No.
However, the only advice I can give to the caring artist who feels like this would be a traumatic moment they don't want to experience, I say by all means, as painful as it is, experience it, because you will learn so much, not only from yourself, but from the person that projected to you. And later on in life, you could possibly use that emotion that you keep in your data bank, your creative data bank, as a meaningful story or a scary monster if you write horror. because comedy and horror are about the same. In order to do both, you've had to go through some kind of pain or trauma.
Oh, this is true.
Mm.
This is true.
Yes.
Horror and comedy, yeah.
I have so appreciated sharing all of this with you. Thank you always for opening up. And so the third book in the series is due out. Do we have a date yet?
No, they're still in the process of creating the cover. I still want to go with the EC Tales from the Crypt comic motif cover.
Okay.
I think
That was striking for me, yeah.
Yes, the artist who has done those, he's also, pardon my French, she is also a transgender. She just recently came out.
Oh.
Her name is Zach Crockett, and she goes by the nom de plume Smooch.
Smooch.
Oh, I love it. Okay.
Keep it in the family. All right.
You ever see her work? She does wonderful transitions, and she can do them, both sides of the transgender universe.
Okay.
When I talk, sometimes I used to stutter when I was a kid, so.
Oh, okay.
Well,
It comes out when I get excited.
I understand, and you've done a beautiful job with it, as has our president, who also used to stutter. That it doesn't get in the way.
I took that as, that as a way of. No, I took it as an inspiration, and then usually people, when they make fun of him or because he sounds like he's babbling. Anybody who's had the burden of stuttering understand what he's going through, and I couldn't for the life of me understand the stress that he goes through, because Barack Obama is a perfect example. Being a president ages the heck out of you. He started out as Denzel Washington, and he came out as Morgan Freeman. I mean, they age real fast.
It's true.
I mean, it's like they go through some kind of time vortex. Instead of 8 years, they age like 20. I wouldn't want their job.
Well, that's if you're doing the job.
If you're doing the job,
because the last one looks exactly the damn same.
Yeah, well.
Every time, one day I want him to take a montage of him and put it to the chant of those kids when they were calling up Pumpkinhead.
Oh God!
You know what I'm talking about?
Oh God!
Call it the Trump/Pumpkinhead montage. Maybe I just started something. See it on YouTube
from your lips.
I don't mind. You never know in life who you inspire.
It's true.
Or who inspires
Or with
you.
what? Right.
It's
Allison,
the ripple effect.
It has been an absolute pleasure. I want to thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
You are welcome.
Me as well. If you want me to come back, just ask.
Oh,
of course,
baby. That's where I was going. I would love to talk more. I appreciate it so much. It's affirming, and it's always affirming in ways we don't understand. Just to let some trans girls sit down and chat. There we go. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, and all of the rest of us. This has been Allison Church. I am Martha Madrigal.
And I am Charles Tyson Jr.
And Allison, thank you so much. Peace, y'all.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Full Circle is a Never Scared Productions podcast, hosted by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal, produced and edited by Never Scared, executive produced by Charles Tyson Jr. and Martha Madrigal. Our theme and music is by the Jingleberries.